Last week, Joan Sabinski and I talked about the issue of hate. And this week, we want to talk about a topic that we feel is quite related and has really come to attention in the news, sadly, and that's alternative lifestyles. Specifically, it was just so tragic to hear about Next Benedict, a 16-year-old non-binary student. They were attacked in the bathroom of their high school, and later Next died. I've been very concerned about the Kansas Attorney General, Chris Kobach. He has told schools, even though there is no specific law in Kansas that requires this, he's telling schools that they have to out transgender students to their parents. And I personally know, because my son is a therapist, of the shocking statistic rates about suicide and attempted suicide with young trans children. Now, this is a very complex topic that covers everything from, the law to psychiatry. But I want Joni, I've asked her to talk about the spiritual aspects of this issue. Joni, what are you thinking?
Well, I first became aware of these issues when I was working on my thesis for my degree. And I walked into it like I think most people, this was probably 40 more than 40 years ago, that most people of my time walked into it thinking that these people were weird, there was something wrong with them, it was a mental health issue. But the more I submerged myself in the lifestyle, and not just trans lifestyle, but lesbian, gay, non-binary, all the different parts that go into this, I realized that most of us grew up with a lot of misinformation. I know when I was growing up, we would laugh about men that liked to dress as women and thought that that was really weird. And we never heard of the idea of transgender. It just wasn't part of this, that these were most of the time human beings that from an extremely early age felt as though they couldn't relate to the physical body they were in at all. And as I did my research, I started formulating an idea that maybe part of this was due to past lives, that these people had either had significant past lives or most of their past lives in the other body, or they had not completed a lifetime in which they were being the opposite sex. And now they come in to complete that, or they come in with all these memories of having been the alternative sex. And many, as early as 3 and 4 years old, told me that they would look into the mirror and not recognize themselves. And that they always felt that something was wrong. Now, the first thing I usually say to people who start talking hate about this kind of topic is, do you really think that somebody wakes up one day and says, I think I want to try out what it feels like to be hated? Do you think they wake up and they say, I want to put my life at risk by dressing in a way that promotes fear, thus promoting anger, rage? There are so many lesbian and gay and non-binary and trans people that are routinely brutalized. And the perpetrators often get away with it because the attitude, unfortunately, of a lot of law enforcement is somehow they deserve it. Personally, I had met a very sweet individual through my late husband. They were good friends. This being was 6'4", Black male who presented as a female. And ultimately, he was murdered here in Phoenix, or she was murdered here in Phoenix. And I think that's probably what started me looking at writing this thesis. So the more I got involved with the community, I realized that, like any other community, it's varied and it can't all come down to past lives. And the more I've been looking at the way our planet is going, we have talked in channelings and in the classes that you and I work on together, about the planet is fighting back. Overpopulation is huge, is huge. We don't have the resources to feed what we have now, much less the water and other resources. And we weren't doing anything about it effectively. Consequently, the planet began to fight back. And I think it began to fight back a while ago. So is it a fad that there are people now, more people, lots of people coming out of the proverbial closet and claiming to be non-binary? Is it just a weird coincidence that scientists more and more are finding out that the concept of an XY or XX chromosome is not all there is, and that you can be multiple and still not have that be physically apparent? They used to think that if you had an odd chromosomal chain, that there were certain diseases or ways that the body presented itself because of that. Now they're not even sure that's true. So all of this is changing dramatically. And I think there's a reason for it. Just recently, I read another article that I just sit here and shake my head about. They are claiming, now they're saying it's like 4 million years in the future, but one of the things I have noted is that everything's speeding up, but that the Y chromosome is disappearing. It's the XY that makes a man a man. And if the Y chromosome's disappearing, what does that mean? What does that mean for the future of humanity? The other thing that has been published widely recently is that male sperm count is going way, 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 way down. So it's not only that more trans people and non-binary, intersexed, whatever people are presenting now, but also that our chromosomes are changing. All kinds of things are happening, and I don't think this is an accident. What does bother me is the reaction to it. What difference does it make if somebody wants to dress in the opposite sex? I know for me, I was a tom girl, and nobody thought anything of it. Oh, she's just a tom girl. Yeah, she likes wearing boys' clothes. But if my brother had also decided he wanted to wear girls' clothes, he would have been condemned. In my family, he would have been corporally punished pretty terribly. All because of the way someone is presenting. If you look in history, men would have thought it was very, very strange not to be dressed in wigs and makeup and fancy clothes. But nowadays, that reaps violence from people. So the bigger question is not what's happening and not what is the spiritual significance for the trans person or their families or anything like that. The bigger significance is, what is the spiritual implication for society? And one of the things I think that it addresses again is fear. I cannot think of any other reason people would react as harshly toward a difference that has absolutely nothing to do with them than fear. You might ask, what are they fearing? Well, I think in a lot of people, the fear stems from what they've been taught. It's kind of the situation that if I have to do things a certain way, everybody else should have to. And yeah, they'll use lots of excuses like religion. Religion, I think, is used very, very often as an excuse for hatred and fear. And it's funny because they will cite that LGBT people are ostracized in the Bible, but there are an awful lot of other things that are ostracized in the Bible that they totally ignore.
Hmm.
I don't know many people who practice kosher living, but it's in the Bible. I don't know many fathers who, when they lose their wife, have sexual intercourse with their daughters, but that's also in the Bible. So I'm taking extreme cases, but that's what I think happens out of fear. You're trying to justify your fear and your hatred, so you pull on anything. I think some of it could also be the fact that perhaps there are many people in this world that also are traumatized via their gender, but can't admit it, didn't act on it. So it makes them extremely angry when somebody else is trying to bring it forward. So there are multiple spiritual reasons for this. But the most important is to recognize that no matter what our physical appearance is, we are all the same. We all want love. We all want acceptance. We all want safety and security. We all want to feel joy. We're supposed to be getting around what things look like, and through divine love, feel what it feels like. Put yourself into the role of the other person. For heaven's sake, would anybody take that on a whim? I cannot imagine that. Not being in their shoes, I can only speculate what that might feel like. But I have had some very close friends that identified as trans and had very, very sad, often what I would call self-destructive circumstances. I had one girl who would meet men on the internet and then go meet them at hotels. And I would sit her down and say, there isn't a biological woman who would do that. And she says to me, I can take care of myself. I said, what happens if you're tied up? You know, you're playing a sex game and you get tied up. How do you protect yourself? Be smart. Think of your safety. And she never did. Now, I don't know if she was ever hurt, because I don't think she'd tell me because she'd be afraid I'd say CC, which I wouldn't have done. But I think that deep down inside, that was a self-destructive act. I don't really like myself. I want to be loved and accepted. I'm hoping this man is for real and will do that for me. But if he isn't, and I'm destroyed, oh, well, I deserve it. And that made me want to cry.
Yeah, and I would hope that there has been so much more acceptance and understanding and space for all people to become their authentic selves. And you had said earlier you couldn't, it's hard for you to put yourself in another person's shoes, but you actually did that, I think, quite well when you wrote a trans character in the Ariana series. And that character is actually my favorite. What there, I don't want to give too much away, but there is a scene where the young person is attacked, and the way you wrote about that character, and I know you channeled it through Equinox, the collective consciousness that you work with for 45 years. It gave me such understanding of what it feels like to experience this world as a transgender person, and it opened up my heart and gave so much love. So that's why if people want to understand the experience of a trans person, I think this book you did a great job with that, Joni. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I would like to argue with you about a statement you made
Oh,
that
that's new.
it's easier to be your authentic self now.
Mm,
Because I
mm.
think if you look at what governments in each state are doing, the
Oh, good
opposite is
point.
true. The message they're putting out there is this is unacceptable and we can do whatever we want to you because you're bad or whatever phrase they're using, which also then gives the bullies almost a carte blanche to do what they want. So out of our fear, we are trying to push away something that we don't understand and make laws against it. And all this person is trying to be is who they are. And how does that hurt you? That's what plays in my brain constantly.
Yeah.
Why are they so angry? How does this hurt them? I have never in my life, now that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened and I just don't have it, but I have never in my life heard of a trans person attacking anyone unless it was self-defense. But I'm constantly hearing the opposite.
Mhm.
So what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that if your child meets somebody who is trans and they like them, that somehow your child is going to become trans? This is something the child is born with, just like it's something the child is born with when they're gay. All right. If I was to say to you, I know that you're heterosexual. If I was to say to you, you can no longer be attracted to men, you must be attracted to women. Could you?
Well, that's a really good point. That's what I've always thought about my sexuality. I have no idea why David Cassidy was so beautiful to me when I was 8 years old. It just kind of happened. So, so I think you're exactly right about that. And I think when I was thinking about being more authentic, I was just really thinking about my own experience, and then the experience of my 4 children. And it was so beautiful to watch the fluidity about gender and sex. And they think mom's an old square. They have no idea how much I've evolved. But I think that's what I was getting at, and that's why I'm so thankful for all the work that you're doing, Joni, because you are teaching us how to become our authentic selves, how to have divine love, how to get our act together so we can raise the consciousness to create the world we want to live in, right? So thank you
Yeah.
for talking with us again today, and I can't wait to see what we talk about next time. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.